welcome to Crime in Court. We are continuing today with the deep dive of the execution of Justin Root by Boston police officers and Massachusetts State Police trooper as well. And today we're going to really hone in on the topic of body worn cameras and how they were or maybe weren't at play and how they played a role in this case specifically. So we've gone over many of the details of that day. We've gone through a timeline. We've even gone through the DA's investigations, their reports from their investigations stating that they did nothing wrong. And then we also read most recently through the Roots complaint against the city of Boston and all of the officers involved. So today we're going to, like I said, dive into the topic of body worn cameras. So let's get started. Please hit the like button if you haven't done so already. And here we go. All right. So we in a previous episode, I put together all of the law enforcement interviews into one. I compiled it into one long video, and you could hear the interviews of both interviews from Boston police officer David Goten, who he had two interviews because it was found that he lied in his first interview. And we're going to take a listen just to a snippet of his just a quick little snippet of his first interview, which, as you can see on the screen, first interview took place Wednesday, February 12th. So this is the incident where they shot and killed an unarmed Root. Took place on February 7th. So now they all had time to converse and talk and whatnot. And then some of them even talked to lawyers, and then they were interviewed, deposed basically by their own detectives, their own people. So, as you can see on the screen, conducting the interview is Gerard Medaliano from the Massachusetts State Police. And then we have Kenneth Anderson, an attorney for all of the officers there. Then we also have John Broderick for Boston PD. He's a sergeant detective. Though there's always somebody from Massachusetts State Police and somebody from Boston Police in every interview, and one or the other is doing the questioning. This just happens to be Gerard with Mass State Police is doing the questioning for this one. This is the first interview, and let me get the snippet up for you here. It's very quick. A few seconds here.
Are you assigned a body worn camera?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh crap, I had it on playback speed really fast. Hold on. Okay.
Are you assigned a body worn camera?
Yes.
Okay. Was it affixed to your body?
No.
Okay. Where was it at the time?
In my duty bag.
Okay.
In his duty bag. He did have a camera. He admits he had a camera assigned to him, but he says he wasn't wearing it. It was in his bag.
Is there a reason why it wasn't on? The best of your memory?
I didn't put it. I just didn't have it on.
Okay.
I don't keep it on my body unless I get out for a call.
Okay.
But weren't you out at a call? So that answer doesn't even make sense. But that's what he said. He only puts it on when he's out on a call. Well, aren't you out on a call? You were responding to a call. Why wasn't it on?
Let's just go through the calls.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought there was more to that. That was the end of that. Okay, so that was clip one that I'm going to play for you, but we're going to get to the second interview. But first, I want to show you. I got to switch screens here, so hold on one second. Okay, so this next clip that I want to play for you is from a YouTube channel. Right now it's called The Back Channel. It used to be called, I don't know. The I can't remember. He's changed his name so many times. He's trying to rebrand after some of the Karen Reed folk kind of turned on him. Sean of the Golf, Sean on the Golf, Sean of the Golf, Sean McDonough, whatever YouTube channel name he wants to go by. He's now going by the Back Channel. He's actually had Jennifer Root on, and she went over a lot of the evidence. It was an excellent video. I'll try to remember to link it below. It's a really good video of her talking about all the evidence in this case. But this clip I found, this was probably the best like quick clip that I could play you of what was discovered. So originally, we have David Godin in his first interview a few days after the incident, and he's saying he didn't have his body worn camera on him. Well, that wasn't entirely true because somebody's body worn camera from that day revealed that that wasn't true. So this is a clip of another officer's body worn camera showing Officer Godin. And yeah, so I think that's a good enough description. I'll point him out to you when it gets started.
And he asked, did anyone get shot at the airport?
What do you need?
Nobody knew that
I'll have to
someone
get out of here.
shot at
So you want my
Sorry, she talks a little bit. This guest that he has on talks a little bit through some of the audio, so you can't actually hear it. But what I wanted to show you is the video, the body cam. So we're not as in tune to what they're saying right now, anyways. So watch this. I believe it's this officer here with his back to you that is Officer Godin. But let's take a look.
car?
9:32
Dave,
after the
was
shooting.
anyone shot up at Brigham?
Yes, that is Officer David Godin. You can see right here, body worn camera on him. Okay, body worn camera right there. On This was captured on somebody else's body worn camera who arrived at the scene.
I think so.
Now let's listen to what he says.
Hey, what do you need? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
He's good. All right, let's see what he does with his camera.
Yep.
Did we show it here?
Yep.
All right, so he's right here.
His
Let me
cruiser.
stop this. Let me stop this right. All right, this is Godin here, right?
Yep, Officer David Godin with Boston Police.
All right, hold on. Let me get back here to see what he has his camera, right? All right. Let's just remember now, he's got a camera on him, right? Checking
right.
for
All right. What do you need? I'll have to get out of here. So you want my car? Dave, was anyone shot?
All right, there's the camera right there, guys. Right there.
Yeah.
There's his badge. There's his camera. Keep watching.
Up at Brigham? I don't think so.
There it is.
Hey, what do you need? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Wish we could hear them. All right,
Yeah, it was the tops. He whipped it in.
right.
He just threw it in the car. He just threw it in the vehicle. Oops, I went back too far. Watch that again.
Wish we could hear them.
Very closely. It's in his right hand, and he's about to throw it in the vehicle.
All right,
Right there.
Yeah, it was the tops. He whipped it in.
right. I'll go back there for 2 seconds here.
Out of here. So you
Just
want
see
my
this
car?
again. Watch what he does as he's walking
Was
towards
anyone
the
shot up
car.
at Brigham? I don't think so.
Camera's on.
Hey, what do you need? Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Watch the hands. Just watch the hands. All right. Well, he just took it off. It's in his hand. It's in his right hand. There's the toss. Okay.
So this is clearly after the incident and everybody starts showing up to, respond to this incident that they all hear, shots fired, and they have to deal with that and take reports and whatnot. So all the other officers and people start showing up, and Godin takes his camera off. Interesting. Did he have it playing during the time that he was responding and there was nothing there? Did he delete video? Like what happened? Did he turn it on and it didn't turn on? What's the deal here? Did he just never turn it on? I have a lot of questions about why it was on, why he chose to take it off and throw it into his car after the fact. So, it's just very, very concerning.
We good
You
there?
see him turn around.
Um,
Oops.
Yep.
now we come. No,
What the,
there it. Oh, it's
where'd the, hold on. What the heck was that? My whole thing just went white. Hang on one second. Okay, sorry about that. He's gonna they're gonna show him whip it again, and then you're gonna see him turn around, and you'll see that he does indeed not have the body worn camera on anymore.
So you want my car? Dave, was anyone shot
all right. There's the camera right there, guys.
Okay, I went back.
up at Brigham?
Here we go.
Wish we could hear them. All right,
Yeah, it was the toss. He whipped it in.
right. I'll go back there for 2 seconds here. Watch the hands. Just watch the hands. All right. Well, he just took it off. It's in his hand. It's in his right hand. There's the toss. Okay. We good there?
Yep.
Now we come. No, there it. Oh, it's. Wait a minute now.
Fucking pulled it right out of me on the fucking sidewalk. Did he?
Yeah, nonchalant because the holder.
Goes in and takes something out, but if we listen
Right.
to it,
But
So now you can see this is a piece of plastic that's secured on his jacket where he can secure his body worn camera. So that is the holder. But he took his camera off and threw it in. So it does look different than it did before because you can actually see that hole, like a circular hole there. So that's where it would affix, obviously. So there you have it. He did take off his body worn camera. So now let me switch back to another screen here. Hold on one sec. Okay. So this next clip is obviously from Godin's second interview, which took place over a year later. So Wednesday, May 19th. So first interview was February 12th, 2020. Now we're May 19th, 2021. The conducting officer is John Broderick with the Boston PD. Others in attendance are Kenneth Anderson, the attorney for all of these individuals, all of the officers that were interviewed. Mark Sullivan with Boston PD is also present, and so is Gerard Montaliano. All right, so here is the clip.
First off, for the record, this is the second interview conducted with Police Officer Godin. Prior interview was conducted on Wednesday, February 12, 2020 at the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. Lieutenant Montaliano and I conducted that interview, and Attorney Anderson was present as well. This interview is being based on new information that's come to the attention of the Firearm Discharge Investigation Team relative to a body-worn camera.
New information. So we're actually going to read the report from Boston PD after this regarding the newly discovered body-worn cameras and how they came about that. So
Officer Godin is assigned a Boston Police Department body-worn camera with the serial number of X81325770. Officer Godin, during your interview on February 12, 2020, you were asked if you were assigned a body-worn camera and if it was affixed to your uniform. During that interview, you reported that the body-worn camera was inside your duty bed that was in your Boston police vehicle and that you had not affixed it to your body, and as such, it did not record any of the incident. Upon review of additional body-worn cameras from the Brookline scene, there's video that indicates that you have a body-worn camera affixed to your outer jacket. During the initial interview, you explained your normal practice as it pertains to your activating your body-worn camera. Can you explain that practice again, as it was on that day?
On that specific day, I had my body-worn camera in my duty bag, which would be located on the passenger seat in the front seat of my cruiser.
And you had mentioned that it was your normal practice that you would take the body-worn camera off in between calls where you were on patrol, and you would, if my memory serves me right, you'd affix it to your body upon receiving a call.
Correct.
Okay. And on that
It makes absolutely no sense though, because when you're in the heat of the moment and something happens, you don't have it on you. That's so stupid.
date in question, at the time of the incident, 60 Fenwood Road, it was not affixed to your body and it was inside your car.
To the best of my memory on that day, it was not affixed to my body.
Okay.
To the best of his memory. So, because it's the best of his memory, you can't punish him. You can't do anything to him because that's how he remembers it. So, even if there's body worn camera from another officer that totally disproves the things that he said in his interview, it's okay because that's not how he remembers it.
I'm going to show you a photo, two photographs. We'll mark this one number 1.
He's shown photographs of himself wearing his body worn camera.
And I apologize, it's a little bit blurry, but do you recognize the individual in that picture?
That is me, yes.
Okay, do you want to take a look at it?
No, I see it.
Okay. And this is a little bit of a close-up shot. Does anything draw your attention to that photo?
The body-worn camera.
Okay. We're going to mark that number 2.
So he has to admit he's wearing a body worn camera.
So for the record, I showed Officer Godin 2 photos of himself from the Brookline scene that depict the body-worn camera on the right side of his jacket, opposite where his badge would be. Having viewed that photo, does this refresh or change your independent memory from that day?
No.
Is it still your recollection that you don't remember fixing that body-worn camera onto you?
Yes, it
In the
is.
inside is? Have you ever been involved in stressful situations before that have made you forget some part of the details?
I've never been involved in an incident as stressful as this. So I really can't comment on, because I've never been involved in something like this, so I can't, there's nothing I've done prior to this that was as stressful as this.
Okay. During the investigation, an audit of your body-worn camera was conducted. And as a result of that audit, it appears on Friday, February 7, 2020 at 8:08.24 a.m. is the first time you turned on your body-worn camera and that you made 2 recordings. One was at 8:08 a.m. on Wiggleworth Street, and the second was at 9:09 at 177 Longwood Ave. There were no other recordings made that day. Does that seem accurate?
Yes, it does.
And for the record, according to the Axon device audit trail, your body-worn camera was powered off at 9:13.21 a.m. on February 7th, and the next activity with that body-worn camera was on that date at 1:06.20 p.m. while the body-worn camera was in custody of the video evidence unit. In addition, the body-worn camera assigned to you did not sync with other BPD-activated body-worn cameras in the area. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Officer Gordon, I'm going to ask you just strictly, did you make any attempt to delete any footage from that video?
No.
Okay. And it's your recollection that it was, you have no independent recollection of putting that body-worn camera on either at Fenwood Road or in Brooklyn?
Correct.
Okay. Lieutenant, do you have any questions?
No.
I just have one. After being involved in that stressful incident before coming in, did you have problems sleeping for the next couple of days because of the stress related to this?
Yes.
Oh, I have nothing further.
What kind of question is that? Aren't we here to find out why he lied or what happened, why there was a miscommunication about the body worn camera? Instead, it's like the officers doing the interview or giving him out. It's like, well, do you usually, forget things in stressful situations? Like, totally giving him an out. Like, you can say yes here and be like, oh, yeah, I totally forget stuff all the time in stressful situations, even though I'm a cop and I shouldn't. I should be aware of everything, be aware of more details than less since I'm an officer of the law, but whatever. Um, yeah, so that was his second interview, and that was it. I mean, I only cut out a beginning portion where everybody introduces themselves. That was basically the entire second interview. It in total is 5 minutes and 53 seconds. That's how much they really wanted to get to the bottom of why this officer was not wearing a body worn camera. Okay, so there's that. So let's move on to what I promised you was the Boston Police Department's report regarding this um, new evidence that they discovered. So this is additional interview of police officer David Godin, investigation of intentional firearm discharges by Boston police officer David Godin. Pursuant to Boston Police Rule 303, I respectfully submit an addendum regarding the intentional firearm discharges on Friday, February 7th, 2020, by Boston police officers David Godin, assigned to Area B2, and Michael St. Peter, assigned to the K9 unit in the area of 60 Fenwood Road in Boston, herein after referred to as the Boston scene, and in the area of Boylston and Hammond Streets in Brookline, herein referred to as the Brookline scene, that followed the events in the area of 60 Fenwood Road. On Wednesday, May 19th, 2021, Sergeant Detective Mark Sullivan, assigned to the Boston Police Department Discharge Investigation Team, and I conducted a second interview of Boston Police Officer David Godin relative to his actions on February 7th. Lieutenant Gerard Medaliano of the Massachusetts State Police also assisted in this interview. Police Officer Godin was accompanied by Attorney Kenneth Anderson. The interview was conducted based on additional information obtained regarding the presence of a body-worn camera affixed to Police Officer Godin's outer jacket. So they know that he did. Like it's you have it there right in front of your eyes that it's there and that he did not tell the truth under his first interview. And his answers in his second interview aren't satisfying to me, and the interviewers did not dive nearly deep enough into it, in my opinion. On Wednesday, February 12th, 2020, Lieutenant Medaliano and I conducted an interview of Police Officer Godin in the offices of Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. During that interview, Police Officer Godin was asked if his issued body-worn camera was affixed to his uniform during the incident in question. At that time, Police Officer Godin stated that his body-worn camera was inside his duty bag, which was on the passenger seat of his police vehicle. During the second interview, Police Officer Godin was shown a screenshot of a Boston police officer, which was captured from the body-worn camera of Boston police officer Justin Evangelista. I asked Police Officer Godin if he recognized the individual, and he replied that it was in fact him in the screenshot. I then showed him another screenshot and asked him if anything drew his attention, to which he stated that there was body-worn camera affixed to his jacket. So, like I said, he had to admit it once he was confronted with the evidence. Police Officer Godin was then asked if, after reviewing these photos, and his independent memory of that day changed, and he replied that it had not. An audit of Axon body-worn camera, which is assigned to Police Officer Godin, indicates that on February 7th, the body-worn camera was powered on at 8:08:20 and 21 seconds a.m. and two recordings were made. The 8:08 a.m. is footage from an incident on Wigglesworth Street in Boston, and the second was at 9:09 a.m. at 177 Longwood Avenue in Boston. Those are both prior to the incident with Justin Root. The audit indicates that the body-worn camera was powered off at 9:31:21, and the next activity was on that date at 1:06:20 p.m. when it was taken into custody at the video unit. So it was the video unit staff that had turned it on. In addition to that audit, the body worn camera assigned to police officer Godin did not synchronize with any other Boston police detective activated body worn cameras in the area. So he didn't turn it on, supposedly. Police officer Godin was asked if he made any attempt to delete any footage from that video, which stated that he did not. He then was asked if his recollection remained that he did not recall having affixed the body worn camera on his uniform that day, and he stated that was correct. So he didn't remember affixing it to him, even though he used it earlier in the day. So did you take it off in between those other two calls? Like what? That doesn't make any sense, and I don't buy it that he only puts it on before going into a call. Based on the information available to me, I conclude that Boston police officer Godin did not, or did in fact have his department issued body worn camera affixed to his person during the incident. Video from the Boston scene is inconclusive, huh? And I'm not able to. Oh, so from the Boston scene, they're not able to determine if he had his camera on there. Well, isn't that convenient that they can't figure that out? Because wouldn't that show that he had it on and it should be recording? He was able to remember his um whatchamacallit jammed, his gun jammed at some point and he had to fix it. And he said he did that en route on the way to the Brookline scene. So if he had his body worn camera on, you would think he would turn that on the way if he hadn't already. So, I mean, there were plenty of opportunities for him if he prior to arriving at the Boston scene, and then also prior to arriving at the Brookline scene, if he had it on, he could have turned it on at any point. But we don't know that he. I assume he had it on because he had it on at 9:30. So why would he have taken it off? Video from the Boston scene is inconclusive. Based on the audit trail of Boston police body worn camera ending in 770, it has been confirmed that the body worn camera was not powered on during the incident. So they're saying it was off. There's a picture. These are the pictures of him. There's his body worn camera. So that must have been what he was shown. And I don't, oh, there's the second picture right there. Clearly on. Clearly, that's not what we saw after he went to the car and threw it because that had an open circular hole right there, which clearly you can see on this, but it's not open. It's not clear. It's not hollow, is what I mean to say. So this is the camera that's on and secured into his vest. So proof right there. All right. Let's begin by reading the memorandum of law in support of plaintiff's motion for an evidentiary hearing and sanctions. So this was from the Root family, so Jennifer Root Bannon for the estate of Justin Root. And she filed this to complain about the body worn camera issue and try to get an evidentiary hearing. The judge, I don't know if they ever got their evidentiary hearing. I tried to do some research on that, but couldn't find anything. What I do know is sanctions were never handed out, so we know that. Um, so yeah, just let's be mindful of that as we begin to read this. But I wanted to read this particular document to you because it highlights all of the different details regarding his body worn camera. All right, so This case is about police officers shooting and killing an unarmed civilian, Justin Root. Defendant David Godin, a Boston uh, police officer who shot and killed Mr. Root, has repeatedly claimed, including in his interrogatory answers, which we'll get to, we're going to read those. So, an interrogatory is like so one side can send typed up written questions to the other side and expect them to answer it under oath, under penalties and perjury, all that stuff. And then they can return it to the other side, usually in writing. So it's usually like written questions, whereas a deposition is in person. So it's the written version of a depo, if that makes sense. But they are, I mean, technically it's under oath, it's sworn testimony. So, all right. So they wanted, um, they want David Godin to respond. So they say David Godin has repeatedly claimed, including in his interrogatory answers, signed under the penalties of perjury, that he was not wearing a body worn camera on the day of the shooting, and that his body worn camera was in his duty bag. But video footage from a fellow Boston police officer's body worn camera undeniably shows the defendant, Officer Godin, was wearing body worn camera and moments after the fatal shooting removed. So not only was he wearing it, but then he removed the body worn camera, as we saw, from his chest and tossed it into a cruiser. In other words, defendant Officer Godin lied, apparently to conceal the fact that he was wearing his body worn camera at the time of the fatal shooting. Defendant City of Boston was obligated to collect body worn cameras from all Boston Police Department officers involved in two shootings and a vehicle pursuit that happened on February 7th, upload all footage and preserve that footage. Body worn camera footage of the fatal shooting is the best and most compelling evidence of what occurred at the time of the shooting. It captures police commands allegedly given to Mr. Root's response, and the police opening fire on him. Despite BPD policies governing the collection of body worn camera equipment after police fire their firearms and kill a civilian, the City of Boston, has not produced any video footage from Officer Godin's body worn camera, any documents concerning BPD's process for collecting defendant officers' uh, body worn camera, whether the city investigated whether Officer Godin wore his body worn camera, or the nature and extent of the footage contained on Officer Godin's body worn camera on February 7th. Nor has the city answered plaintiffs' interrogatories related to Officer Godin's or all other responding BPD officers' activation or lack of activation of body worn cameras. If the city failed to fulfill its obligations to collect, review, and preserve body worn camera footage, particularly from defendant Officer Godin's body worn camera, then any footage that they may have recorded was likely deleted. So, I mean, it's a good possibility. We know that they cover for their own in Massachusetts, and I'm sure it's not just Massachusetts. I'm not just singling you guys out, but you guys have a lot of corruption over there. Just saying. Pursuant to federal rules of civil procedure and the court's inherent powers to protect the administration of justice, plaintiff Jennifer Root requests an evidentiary hearing to evaluate, among other things, whether the city undertook any investigation into whether its officers were wearing or had activated body worn cameras on the day of the shooting, the Boston police officers' process for storing and saving body-worn camera footage, whether defendant Godin's body-worn camera was collected, the extent to which it recorded video or audio footage on the day of the shooting, and whether that footage has been deleted. If footage has been deleted, determine when and by whom, and whether defendant Officer Godin and or BPD supervisors complied with the enforced BPD rules governing his use of or failure to use his body-worn camera. Plaintiff also moves for sanctions against defendant Officer Godin and the city in the form of default judgment against both. In the alternative, plaintiff seeks as sanctions adverse inference instructions to the jury the defendant Officer Godin has activated that the defendant Officer Godin had activated his body-worn camera on. So the lack of the evidence means that he must have turned it on and it must not have been good for him. That his body-worn camera recorded both shootings and that the footage would show that the defendant's use of deadly force in Chestnut Hill was unreasonable. So they want that instruction to the jury that the jury can infer the lack of this evidence could mean that it was bad for Officer Godin. Plaintiff also seeks an award of her expenses, including attorney's fees, in filing this motion and conducting an evidentiary hearing. Boston Police Department's body-worn camera policy. BPD Rule 405 governs the use of body-worn cameras and required BPD officers, including defendant Officer Godin, to activate their body-worn cameras during the events of February 7th. So any kind of event or incident that might happen similar to this, they're required to turn their cameras on. Obviously, you would think. It's not, rocket science. You could assume anytime you get called to an incident, and you should probably just have it running all day. There should be that my opinion, unless you're in the bathroom, or a personal call or on personal time during your day, that thing should be running all day, 24/7, because you never know what could happen. You could be walking down the street as an officer and somebody could come up to you and attack you. I'm not saying that, it's just a possibility and you don't have a body worn camera, or someone could approach you and need your help for something and you don't have your camera on to record those conversations. It's just my opinion. You should have it on at all times if you're an officer. But, anyways, all right. So during each shift, a BPD officer must affix his or her body worn camera properly upon his or her uniform in a manner consistent with training, position and adjust the body worn camera to record events, and activate the body worn camera and record as outlined. The same all these rules and sections requires that BPD officers must activate their body-worn cameras during many types of encounters with civilians, including investigative person stops, consensual or articulable reasonable suspicion stops, or stop supported by probable cause. All dispatch calls for service involving contact with civilians. Initial responses by patrol officers, including on site detentions, investigations pursuant to an arrest, and initial suspect interviews on scene. Incidents of pursuit driving, any contact that becomes adversarial, including the use of force incident, when the officer has not already activated the body worn camera. So, all of the things that were happening that morning would have required this, is basically what this is saying. And any other civilian contact or official duty that the officer reasonably believes should be recorded to enhance policing transparency, increase public trust, and police community relations, or preserve factual representations of officer-civilian interactions. BPD officers must continue recording until the event has concluded and to the extent prior to deactivating a body-worn camera, state the reason for doing so. There can be little question that the Boston Police Department officers' confrontation with Mr. Root at Brigham and Women's Hospital, the pursuit down Route 9, and the fatal shooting in Chestnut Hill are types of civilian encounters that requires a Boston Police Department officer to activate his body-worn camera. If an officer fails to activate the body worn camera, fails to record the entire contact, or interrupts the recording, the officer shall document in the incident report that the recording failure occurred. An officer who does not create an incident report must submit body worn camera special notification form to his or her duty supervisor to document that a recording failure occurred by the end of the shift or as soon as practical. So there are specific protocol that they need to be following, and that was definitely not done this day. Then the duty supervisor shall submit the officer's form through his or her chain of command to his or her bureau chief. At the end of each shift, the officer must place his body worn camera on his assigned docking station, which will charge the body worn camera's battery and transfer video data to the storage system. The officer must also categorize the recorded footage based on the nature of the policy activity in the footage. So the officer, not only are they required to make sure that their camera's recording at each incident, they also need to identify all of the incidents on their video, the recorded footage. After an officer-involved death, officer-involved shooting, or other use of deadly force, the patrol supervisor shall collect all body-worn camera equipment belonging to officers involved in or who witnessed the incident. BPD personnel must transport the body-worn camera to the involved officer's assigned district or the homicide unit for upload to the system. An officer who used deadly force, as well as supervisors and other officers at the scene, shall not view any video before the homicide unit or firearm discharge investigation team views the footage and uploads it to the system. So none. Okay, so an officer who uses deadly force, as well as supervisors and other officers, shall not view any of the video before the homicide unit or firearm discharge investigation team views the footage and uploads it to the system. Was that done in this case? I don't know. We don't know. We know that there were several days before uh their first interview, and that would have been plenty of time for them to perhaps delete some video footage and then put him in the position to deny that he had it. And then it wasn't until somebody else's body worn camera came out that showed that he had body worn camera on that day. It's just very suspicious. You know what I'm saying? If it weren't Boston police, if it weren't the state that was trying to maliciously persecute and prosecute Karen Reed and also cover up the murder and essay of Sandra Birchmore that was happening for years when she was a minor. I wouldn't question it so much, but it's the same people. These are all the same people, so I question it wholeheartedly. I mean, the Boston police are obviously different, but we still have, Massachusetts State Police that are it as a part of it, and I don't see them being that far off. They're still brothers in blue, Canton and Massachusetts State Police still, I feel like they would have scratched each other's backs. So, um, especially, Canton for MSP. I don't know. It all makes me crazy. Anyways, let's move on. So, duty supervisors must ensure that BPD officers follow Rule 405, and commanding officers or their designees must review body-worn camera activity logs and reports to ensure officers remain in compliance with department policy and training. Body-worn camera related to death investigation or use of deadly force shall be retained indefinitely. Well, then that's a problem if they deleted it. All right, so police shot and killed Mr. Root on February 7th, 2020. This is the factual background. On the morning of February 7th, 2020, Mr. Root drove to the area around Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. The BPD was called to the area with a report of a person with a gun. Defendant Officer Godin and Boston Police Department Officer Michael St. Peter arrived in separate vehicles at the intersection of Fenwood Road and Vining Street, near where Mr. Root had gotten out of his car. Defendant Officer Godin exited his cruiser as Mr. Root walked on the sidewalk away from the intersection. Defendant Officer Godin, now on foot, turned the corner, encountered Mr. Root, and drew his firearm. When Mr. Root turned around and saw Defendant Officer Godin's gun pointing in his direction, he removed from his waistband an uncharged, unloaded, clear plastic paintball gun. In other words, a toy. Defendant Officer Godin fired at Mr. Root and stumbled backwards, falling on the sidewalk and into the intersection. He tripped himself, just so y'all know, because he tried to make it seem like it wasn't his own fault that he fell. Defendant Officer Godin got up and tried to fire again at Mr. Root, but his firearm jammed. During this series of events, Officer St. Peter, who had parked his cruiser in the middle of the intersection of Fenwood Road and Vining Street, also fired at Mr. Root. Mr. Root was hit with at least one bullet fired by Defendant Officer Godin or Officer St. Peter. After being shot, Mr. Root limped back to his car and drove away. We know he was shot multiple times in the hand, which I think happened at that up close um, encounter with Officer Godin right away. And then I think he had even more bodily injuries from St. Peter, because we know Officer Godin fired about 5 rounds and Officer St. Peter fired 10. And we know that he was bleeding quite a lot. He lost about half of his blood. So he uh, he could have been shot once that was really just in a very bad spot, or he could have been shot in multiple places. But I think he was probably more likely shot in multiple places. Mr. Root was hit with at least one bullet fired by either Godin or St. Peter. After being shot, Mr. Root limped back to his car and drove away. Defendant Officer Godin and Officer St. Peter got into their respective cruisers and followed Mr. Root. Other BPD cruisers and Massachusetts State Police joined the pursuit. During the pursuit, Defendant Officer Godin fixed the jam in the firearm he was carrying. Mr. Root drove westbound on Huntington Avenue in Boston, which becomes Route 9 in Brookline. He was bleeding profusely due to the gunshot wounds that he sustained near the hospital. At the intersection of Route 9 and Hammond Street in Chestnut Hill, Mr. Root's car collided with another vehicle. His car traveled through the intersection and stopped on Route 9 at or near the entrance to a shopping center parking lot. Mr. Root's car was heavily damaged, 2 wheels had fallen off, and a third tire was partially hanging off. He got out of the car, stumbled around the front of it, and limped into a nearby sidewalk, where he fell to the ground and lay on his back. He managed to get back up on his feet and then stumbled toward a mulched area near the entrance to the shopping center parking lot. Defendant Officer Godin and other officers arrived at the entrance to the parking lot. They got out of their cruisers and approached Mr. Root, who was on the ground covered in blood and non-verbal. A former EMT who had been sitting in her car in the parking lot ran to help Mr. Root and was trying to administer aid to him. Officers arrived and yelled at her to run away, which she did because they were pointing guns at her. Officers were simultaneously yelling confusing commands at Mr. Root, given his condition and the fact that the commands made little sense given the circumstances. He could not have comprehended or responded to the commands. Within a matter of seconds, Defendant Officer Godin, 4 other officers, and a Massachusetts state trooper opened fire without warning and shot Mr. Root at least 31 times Mr. Root died from that shooting. The four other BPD officers were Joseph McMenamy, Leroy Fernandez, Brenda Figueroa, and Corey Thomas, and the state trooper was Paul Keneally. Defendant Officer Godin told police investigators that he was not wearing a body-worn camera on February 7th and that his body-worn camera was in his duty bag. Norfolk County District Attorney's Office opened a criminal investigation into Mr. Root's death. As part of that investigation, on February 12, 2020, 5 days after the shooting, a state police lieutenant and a BPD detective sergeant interviewed defendant Officer Godin. We just, they have that the transcript there as an exhibit, but we went over a portion of that, just a clip. During the interview, defendant Officer Godin told the investigators that though he is assigned a body-worn camera, it was not affixed to his body on February 7th, even though he used it twice already that morning. Instead, defendant Officer Godin claimed that the body-worn camera was left in his duty bag. When an investigator asked if there was a reason why he was not wearing it, defendant Officer Godin replied, I just didn't have it on. I don't keep it on my body unless I get out for a call. Again, weren't you on a call? The investigators did not ask any follow-up questions about that. Exactly what I'm saying. They really did not dive into that whole topic. In addition, the Boston Police Department's final firearm discharge investigation team report on its officers' intentional firearm discharges on February 7th states that police officer David Godin was not wearing his body-worn camera at the time of discharge. BWC, or body-worn camera, so annoying with all the acronyms. I want to not say BWC because that's not even like much of a shortcut. The body worn camera was inside of his assigned department vehicle. So it was found in his vehicle. In his interrogatory answers, defendant Officer Godin claimed that he was not wearing a body worn camera on that day and that it was in his duty and he did not activate it at any time. So, okay. So now we're going to get into the interrogatory questions. So these were questions that were sent from Jennifer Root Jennifer Root Bannon to Officer Godin. So there were two of the plaintiff's interrogatories to defendant Officer Godin that relate to whether he wore an activated body worn camera. And it says, see the exhibit. So let's go. First interrogatory, number 2, was asked, describe in detail your use or activation of a body-worn camera before, during, or after the vehicle pursuit and Chestnut Hill shooting, including without limitation whether you failed to wear or activate a body-worn camera. If you fail to wear or activate a body-worn camera, your reason for that failure, and if you did activate a body-worn camera, why did you so when you did? Okay. Defendant Officer Godin answered number 2 as follows. I was not wearing my body-worn camera during either the vehicle pursuit or the Chestnut Hill shooting and did not activate it at any time. At the time I heard the call about the man with a gun in the Brigham, I guess they just call it that for short, my camera was not yet affixed to my body. Okay. It was still in my duty bag. The call was not assigned to me. So did he put it on in his car on the way to Brookline and then took it off after? Right? So this doesn't make any sense. There's no way that it wasn't affixed to his body. So he had it on for these other 2 calls in the morning, took it off, but at some point put it on after the Brigham and Women's Hospital in pursuit to Brookline. But then, because he has it on in Brookline, and then he takes it off after the incident. That makes absolutely no sense. He's lying. He's absolutely 100%, in my opinion, lying right there. 'Cause he says it wasn't affixed to him before. So I just don't, I don't get why this is not more of a big deal. He says it was still in my duty bag. The call was not assigned to me. But given that I was just around the corner and given the nature of the call, I responded to the scene. So you responded to a scene. So why didn't you turn your body worn camera on? Like it is your, your own protocol, your own practice that you turn it on when you respond to a scene. Soon thereafter, he became engaged with both the security guard and the suspect. The suspect pointed a firearm at me and fired. Thereafter, I was more concerned in apprehending the suspect who I believe just fired at me than with taking my camera out of my bag. I did not know if he would attempt to shoot someone else. But you were en route, driving, following him. You were able to unjam your gun, but couldn't make sure that your body worn camera was on. Okay. Second interrogatory number 7, who was asked, state the basis for your denial of the allegations in complaint 79 that you were wearing a body worn camera during the Chestnut Hill shooting, but did not activate it until after the shooting. Defendant Officer Godin answered, I was not wearing my body worn camera during the incident and did not activate it at any time. Liar, liar. I see that your pants are on fire, Officer Godin. Defendant Officer Godin signed his interrogatory answers under the pains and penalties of perjury. His counsel signed the answers as well. So we actually have that exhibit. I'm not going to read all of the answers, but yeah, this is basically, this is basically what we just read. What are those 2 questions? They didn't ask that many questions, but as you can see, they had a few pages of questions for him, and those 2 were the only ones that really pertain to the body worn camera. So, all right. So the defendant signed, and so did his attorney, under pains and penalties of perjury. Yet here we are. They definitely perjured themselves, I would say. Video footage shows Defendant Officer Godin was wearing a body-worn camera when he shot Mr. Root in Chestnut Hill. Some BPD officers at the scene of the Chestnut Hill shooting had activated their body-worn cameras. A body-worn camera video with the file name Officer Involved Shooting and Person with Gun was had captured the aftermath of the shooting. A copy of that recording is being submitted to the court on a disc in connection with this motion and is labeled Exhibit 5. So we saw that already on Shauna the Golf's channel, whatever, the back channel. I don't know. Still images from the footage are compiled in Exhibit 6. Some of those images are embedded in the following paragraphs. Counsel for plaintiff added the orange arrows to the still images. This recording starts with the unidentified officer driving a cruiser, presumably during the pursuit of Mr. Root. 7 minutes and 10 seconds into the recording, at which point the timestamp on the upper right corner reads T143105Z. He parks in Chestnut Hill near the scene of the shooting and exits the cruiser. He runs on Route 9 through the intersection at Hammond Street and towards the mulched area where Mr. Root had been killed. The shooting had already occurred. by the time the officer arrived. Roughly 45 seconds later, the unidentified officer sees defendant Officer Godin, points at him, and asks if he is all right. There's an image from that body worn camera. Defendant Officer Godin walks towards the unidentified officer and 4 or 5 seconds later is an arm's length away from the unidentified officer. A body worn camera is clearly visible on the right side of the defendant Officer Godin's chest. The unidentified officer asks Defendant Officer Godin, "What do you need?" Defendant Officer Godin says, "I gotta get out of here." The unidentified officer asks, "You need me to go in my car, Dave?" Defendant Officer Godin, who has been walking away, turns back towards the unidentified officer. Again, a body worn camera is clearly visible on the right side of Defendant Officer Godin's chest while he gestures with his right hand, which is empty. So we see it clearly, clear as day, in his uh, on his person right there. Defendant Officer Godin asks whether anyone was shot at Brigham, to which the unidentified officer answers that he does not think so. He then asks Defendant Officer Godin, "What do you need?" Defendant Officer Godin responds, "I'm good," and waves the officer off and starts to walk away. His right hand is still empty. As Defendant Officer Godin walks toward a parked cruiser and has its driver's side front door open, he reaches upward with his right arm. The unidentified officer follows the Defendant Officer Godin in it and Officer Godin is seen holding a black object in the palm of his hand as he walks towards the cruiser. With his right arm, Defendant Officer Godin tosses the black object into the cruiser's open door. The video shows that Defendant Officer Godin's right hand is empty after he tosses the black object into the cruiser. Defendant Officer Godin reaches into the cruiser's open door and turns around holding a light-colored object that he apparently took from inside the cruiser. When he turns around, the bracket to which the body-worn camera has been affixed is clearly visible on his jacket, but the body-worn camera is gone. A third officer asks the unidentified officer if the cruiser with the open door into which Defendant Officer Godin tossed the black object is Dave's car. The unidentified officer responds that it is. The third officer then leans into the cruiser's open door, comes back out, and closes the door. The third officer was wearing a body-worn camera. Yikes. Not looking good for Officer Godin, huh? A BPD sergeant detective reported that he transported Defendant Officer Godin to headquarters where Defendant Officer Godin turned over his body-worn camera and stated he had not reviewed any footage on it. According to the firearms detective unit, whatever that whole acronym stands for, in the investigative report prepared by BPD Sergeant Detective William Dugan, he transported Defendant Officer Godin and another Boston police officer to the Boston Police headquarters for interview on February 7th after the incident. At nope. Okay. According to Sergeant Detective Dugan, during the ride, there was no conversation between us slash them about the circumstances of the incident. At headquarters, Officer Godin surrendered his body-worn camera and accompanying cell phone. Prior to doing so, Officer Godin told Sergeant Detective Dugan that he had not reviewed any footage. Sergeant Detective Dugan then transported Detective Officer Godin and other BPD officer to the BPD station to which they were assigned. Defendant Officer Godin and the city have failed to produce responsive documents governing body-worn cameras. The plaintiff requested documents from Defendant Officer Godin and the City of Boston concerning his and other BPD officers' use or interaction of body-worn cameras on February 7th. Specifically, plaintiffs sought from defendant Officer Godin all documents and communications concerning whether you used or activated a body worn camera before, during, or after the vehicle pursuit or the Chestnut Hill shooting. Defendant Officer Godin made several objections to this request and referred to two documents that the city produced: the Norfolk County District Attorney Office's interview of Godin, Bates stamped, um, with a Bates stamp of 264 ending in 2649, and the audio recording of that interview, Bates stamped 3095, which is not an exhibit of this motion. And for the city of Boston, the plaintiff propounded three relevant document requests. Request number 9, all documents and communications, including but not limited to reports, transcripts, notes, memoranda, audio recordings, radio transmissions, video recordings, photographs, text messages, and emails concerning the Chestnut Hill shooting. This request includes all body-worn camera footage recorded on any body-worn camera worn by any BPD officer who was at the scene before, during, or after the Chestnut Hill shooting. Request number 10, all documents and communications identifying all BPD officers who were at the scene before, during, or after the shooting. And request number 11, all documents and communications concerning BPD officer defendants' use or lack of use of body-worn cameras on February 7th. In response to both requests numbers 9 and 11, the city made several objections and referred to the following sets of documents it produced, many of which have nothing to do with body-worn cameras: text messages and voicemails that defendant Officer Thomas sent or received, text messages and voicemails that defendant Officer Godin sent or received, and transcripts and audio recordings of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office interviews of the individual defendants and various eyewitnesses, reports from the Brookline Fire and Police Departments, reports from the State Police, reports from the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office investigation, video and photos of the scene at Chestnut Hill, body-worn camera footage not tied to any specific officer, and photos of searches of Mr. Root's car and home. In response to request number 10, the city objected on the grounds that communication is vague and ambiguous, but represented that it is in the process of compiling responsive records and will supplement its response. Neither defendant Officer Godin nor the city has produced documents or communications concerning the collection of his equipment, including his body-worn camera, any video or audio footage from his body-worn camera, audit information with respect to his body-worn camera, whether defendant Officer Godin or a supervisor followed the requirements of BPD Rule 405 with respect to when an officer fails to activate the body-worn camera, fails to record the entire contact, or interrupts the recording, or whether any supervisor or investigator followed up with defendant Officer Godin about his purported failure to wear his body-worn camera. So basically, they want to know why they haven't received any of these documents. They've never received body-worn camera from Godin's body-worn camera. They've never received footage, I should say, from his camera. They've never received any kind of documents, reports, anything, nothing in regards to this, like any kind of anything into the investigation as to why his body-worn camera wasn't on, or if it was on, if there was any footage. None of that none of those investigative materials have been turned over to the Root estate, which how can you how can you have a case if you can't prove anything and they're not giving you. This is what Norfolk County does. They like to withhold evidence, and then you can't really go forward with your case because you don't have any evidence against the corrupt state. So it's just kind of how they roll there. The city has been similarly evasive in its interrogatory answers. In response to the four interrogatories concerning the use or activation of body worn cameras on February 7th, the city raised objections and then stated, notwithstanding and without waiving this objection, the city agreed to produce the BPD's investigatory documents upon the completion of the investigation and will supplement this answer accordingly. The city has not substantially or substantively answered any of the plaintiff's interrogatories. That's interesting. That's this footnote here. In response to each interrogatory, the city merely stated that it would supplement its answer, but it's not giving any answer. So, how are you going to supplement an answer? In other words, the city is refusing to answer interrogatories concerning body worn cameras use until the completion of the BPD's investigation. Hmm, that's curious. The city has not indicated when that might be. Argument. An evidentiary hearing is necessary to ascertain what happened to the video footage from defendant Officer Godin's body-worn camera, the steps taken by the BPD to recover his body-worn camera and preserve its footage, and whether defendant Officer Godin or the BPD followed BPD rules. Given defendant Officer Godin's repeated dishonest conduct and the city's failure to properly review and produce responsive documents and answer interrogatories, an evidentiary hearing is necessary to ensure evidence is preserved and to ascertain how BPD handled body-worn camera evidence after the fatal shooting. Video footage, especially body-worn camera footage, is the most probative evidence of what happened before and during the shooting at Brigham and Women's Hospital, the vehicle pursuit, and the fatal shooting in Chestnut Hill. As the city itself acknowledges, body-worn cameras reinforce the public's perception of police professionalism and preserve factual representations of officer-civilian transactions. BPD Rule 405. For this reason, defendant Officer Godin was required to wear and activate his body-worn camera on February 7th, and the city was required to collect his body-worn camera and preserve footage from February 7th relating to the shootings. Video evidence clearly shows that he was wearing a body-worn camera in the minutes after he shot and killed Mr. Root. Video evidence also shows that within minutes of his having fired several bullets into Mr. Root and before Mr. Root's body had been removed from the scene, Officer Godin made the conscious decision to remove his body-worn camera from his chest and throw it into his cruiser. I would say so. I would definitely say it was a conscious decision. Yet just days later, during his interview with the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, defendant Officer Godin concocted a story about how he was not even wearing his body-worn camera and that instead it was in his duty bag. He stuck to that false story in his sworn interrogatory answers. Why would Officer Godin lie about even having worn his body-worn camera on February 7th unless he was attempting to conceal harmful footage it recorded? Good point. Good point. I agree with that. According to the BPD's investigative unit, their reports that was prepared by Sergeant Detective Dugan, defendant Officer Godin was taken to Boston Police Department headquarters where he turned over his body-worn camera and in doing so told Sergeant Detective Dugan that he had not reviewed any of the footage on it. Defendant Officer Godin's statement to Dugan clearly implies that he knew there was footage on his body-worn camera. Aha. Also, a very good point. But the city has not produced any footage taken on February 7th from Officer Godin's body-worn camera. Any documents reflecting the collection of defendant Officer Godin's body-worn camera, any documents reflecting the upload, review, or preservation of footage from defendant Godin's camera, Any investigation into the accuracy of defendant Godin's repeated false statements that he was not wearing his body-worn camera on February 7th, or any of the required reporting that should have occurred when Officer Godin informed investigators that, in violation of BPD Rule 404, he had not worn or activated his body-worn camera on February 7th. Body-worn camera footage in Exhibit 5 and the city's refusal to answer interrogatories and produce responsive documents related to defendant Officer Godin's body-worn camera raise serious questions about the thoroughness of the BPD's investigation of the February 7th shootings, the thoroughness of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office's investigation of the shooting in Chestnut Hill, and defendant Officer Godin's and the city's conduct in this litigation. Where is the body-worn camera that Officer Godin surrendered? Where is the footage from his body-worn camera that defendant Officer Godin claimed he had not reviewed? Was it preserved? Good question. Were people destroying evidence? Even better question. Was that or any of the other footage deleted or altered? Did defendant Officer Godin and or supervisor follow the requirements of BPD Rule 405 to properly document his claimed failure to wear and activate his body-worn camera? If so, where is that documentation? Did BPD supervisors comply with the requirements of BPD Rule 405 for collecting and securing body-worn camera footage following a fatal shooting? Did the BPD conduct any investigation into its officers' use and activation of body-worn cameras? All of these things, there's protocol into investigating, and where is that investigation? We need to see the family of Justin needs to see that investigation. These answers or these questions must be answered. They are directly relevant to the defendant Officer Godin's and the city's credibility and liability, because defendant Officer Godin has proved himself to be untruthful and the city has not taken its investigatory and discovery obligations seriously. An evidentiary hearing conducted under the supervision of this court is the only reliable means of uncovering the truth. It is undeniably the best and most efficient way to secure testimony and document evidence establishing the answers to these questions. It's really sad that you have to ask a judge for an evidentiary hearing because the officers can't be trusted. And even in this case, the Norfolk County, the judges there are protecting their own anyways. So nothing, I'm sure, ever came of this. I doubt they even thought twice about this filing, which is so unfortunate. They're probably like, "Oh, it's against the city, the state. Nah, we're not going to take it seriously. Why should we?" So sickening the way that they use their power against the people. Sanctions are warranted against both defendant Officer Godin and the city. Interrogatories must be answered fully and in writing under oath. The person making the answers must sign them, and an attorney who raises objections to interrogatories must sign as to the objections. In responding to document requests, the responding party must either object to a request or produce or permit inspection of responsive documents. A signature on discovery responses is a certification that, to the best of the person's knowledge, information, and belief, formed after a reasonable inquiry, the responses are consistent with the federal rules of civil procedure and warranted by existing law. If a certification violates the rule without substantial justification, the court, on motion or on its own, must impose an appropriate sanction on the higher court, the party on whose behalf the signer was acting, or both. Sanctions may include an order to pay the reasonable expenses, including attorney's fees, caused by the violation. Moreover, if a party fails to provide information, the party is not allowed to use that information to supply evidence in the case unless the failure was substantially justified or is harmless. neither of which applies here. Beyond that sanction, the court may order the payment of reasonable expenses caused by the failure to properly provide information, may inform the jury of the party's failure to provide that information, and may impose other appropriate sanctions, including those listed in rules, whatever. I'm not reading all that. Other appropriate sanctions include directing facts to be taken as established. So they could just, the judge could be like, you know what, I'm just going to not take those facts because they don't, they didn't give you the discovery or they're not willing to provide the information you need. Prohibiting disobedient parties from opposing claims or from introducing designated matters into evidence, striking pleadings, rendering default judgment against disobedient party, and treating failure to obey a court order as contempt of court. So those are just a bunch of different possible remedies that the court could offer for relief for the state not providing their discovery or meeting their discovery obligations. In addition, under its inherent powers to control discovery, the court has discretion to enter default judgment against a party for abuse of the discovery process. District court acted within its wide discretion in entering default judgment against defendant who repeatedly abused discovery process, had a history of evasiveness and intransigence, and failed. Does that mean like you're constantly moving? And failed to explain its sudden revelation that it did not retain evidence that was central to the case. A federal district court must be able to protect the administration of justice by levying sanctions in response to abusive litigation practices. Affirming imposition of the following sanctions against defendants and defense counsel who resisted discovery and deliberately withhold discoverable information. Court had ordered them to produce default judgment on issue of liability, stricken discovery responses, award of plaintiffs' costs and attorneys' fees and fines. The court's inherent power is said to be governed not by rule or statute, but by the control necessarily vested in courts to manage their own affairs so as to achieve the orderly and expeditious disposition of cases. Defendant Officer Godin's conduct has been egregious, and the city's conduct has not been much better. During Defendant Officer Godin's February 12, 2020 interview conducted by the State Police Lieutenant and the BPD Detective Sergeant in connection with the criminal investigation of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, he unequivocally stated that his body-worn camera was not affixed to him on the day of the shooting, but was in his duty bag. The statement was a lie. Defendant Officer Godin repeated the lie under the penalties of perjury in his interrogatory answers. In his answer to interrogatory number 2, Defendant Officer Godin claimed, "I was more concerned with apprehending the suspect who I believed just fired at me than with taking my camera out of my bag." That statement, too, was a lie. BPD and, by extension, the city knew or should have known that Defendant Officer Godin's statement about the body-worn camera was false, given that the footage at Exhibit 5, which shows he was wearing his body-worn camera in Chestnut Hill on February 7th, was taken by another BPD officer's body-worn camera. BPD Rule 405 contains multiple provisions that governed Defendant Officer Godin's and BPD supervisor's conduct related to his body-worn camera. Defendant Officer Godin was required to wear and activate his body-worn camera at Brigham and Women's Hospital and keep it on throughout the vehicle pursuit and his interactions with Root that followed. So from the beginning of the interaction with Root all the way till the end, should have had that thing running. After failing to activate his body-worn camera, he was required to complete an incident report documenting that failure. If he failed to complete the incident report, he was required to submit a body worn camera special notification form to his supervisor, and the supervisor was required to submit the form through the chain of command to the bureau chief. After the deadly shooting, a supervisor was required to collect defendant Officer Godin's body worn camera equipment, transport it to his assigned district or the homicide unit, and upload it to the system. BPD is required to retain the footage indefinitely. BPD supervisors were required to ensure the defendant, Officer Godin, complied with Rule 405. Despite these clear rules, the city has objected to document requests and interrogatories related to the use and activation of body worn cameras on February 7th, and it has not produced documents reflecting what happened to defendant Officer Godin's body worn camera after the fatal shooting. The city's failure to engage in basic discovery of highly probative evidence concerning the only officer involved in both the Brigham and Women's Hospital and the Chestnut Hill shootings is an unacceptable flouting of the discovery process. Based on the footage showing defendant Officer Godin remove his body-worn camera and toss it into his cruiser, his repeated lie about his body-worn camera being in his duty bag, and Sergeant Detective Dugan's report stating the defendant Officer Godin told him that he had not viewed any footage from his body-worn camera, the only reasonable inferences are that one, his body worn camera contained footage from that day, that incident with Justin. He was extremely concerned about the contents of that footage. And three, he wanted to ensure that the footage was concealed. So those are some pretty big inferences there. But what do you think? I, I believe that there was some concealment and some possible cover up in this, perhaps. I wouldn't put it past them. If he believed the video footage would have exonerated him, he would not have hidden it. That's another great point by these attorneys for the Root family. At bottom, plaintiff has been denied the most compelling piece of evidence available to demonstrate that defendant Officer Godin and his other individual defendants' use of deadly force against Mr. Root was unreasonable. Footage from defendant Officer Godin's body-worn camera may have also contained evidence of defendant BPD Officer Joseph McMenamin's kicking Mr. Root seconds before the fatal shooting. Of the other officers who shot Mr. Root in Chestnut Hill, defendant Trooper Keneally was not required to wear a body-worn camera. Defendant officers Fernandez and Thomas were apparently working overtime shifts, and for some inexplicable reason, BPD policy does not require body-worn cameras to be worn on overtime shifts. Make that make sense, BPD. Defendant Officer McMenamy was wearing his body-worn camera, but only activated it after the shooting. Not a good a did you there. And defendant Officer Figueroa had activated her body-worn camera, but had her arm over the body-worn camera during the shooting. The city has not produced body-worn camera footage from any other officer showing the shooting itself. So therefore, the actual shooting, the actual body-worn camera footage that would show it is missing. Or just happened to not have been taken. Doubtful. Defendant Officer Godin has repeatedly been dishonest. He lied to the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office investigators and falsified his interrogatory answers. On the day of the shooting, he told Sergeant Detective Dugan that he had not reviewed footage of the shooting on his body-worn camera, footage he obviously believed existed at the time. Moreover, the city was required to collect Officer Godin's body-worn camera, upload and review the footage on it, and produce that footage to the plaintiff. It has failed to do so. It too has hidden behind defendant officer Godin's perjured testimony that his body worn camera was sitting in his duty bag. So the city of Boston is just like, yeah, we believe him. He thought it was in his bag. Okay, what? No, it wasn't. We know it wasn't. We have video of that. And justice was not done in this case. And clearly, there's some shady business going on here. It too has hidden behind defendant Officer Godin's perjured testimony that his body worn camera was sitting in his duty bag. The city's supervision of its police officers is paramount. An armed agent, as armed agents of the city, BPD officers are responsible for following BPD policies and respecting civilian constitutional rights. Defendant Officer Godin and the city have failed to comply with their discovery obligations. Accordingly, sanctions, including default judgment and plaintiff costs, attorney's fees in bringing this motion, and conducting an evidentiary hearing are warranted against both. Short of default judgment, in the alternative, plaintiff seeks as sanctions adverse inference jury instructions that defendant Officer Godin had activated his body-worn camera on February 7th. The body-worn camera recorded both shootings, and the footage would show that defendant Officer Godin's use of deadly force in Chestnut Hill was unreasonable. Conclusion. Because defendant Officer Godin has repeatedly lied about whether he wore a body worn camera on February 7th, and the city has not produced information related to his body worn camera or any footage from February 7th that his body worn camera may have recorded. Plaintiff respectfully requests an evidentiary hearing on the issues laid out in Argument Section 1. Plaintiff also respectfully requests that the court impose sanctions on defendant Officer Godin and the city as outlined in Argument Section 2. Respectfully submitted, Plaintiff Jennifer Root Bannon. And I don't know, unfortunately, like I said, I don't know if there was an evidentiary hearing, if I kind of have a feeling that there wasn't, or if there was, not much of it, not much came about from it. I'm not really sure, but we know that these charges were later dismissed. They never were able to take it to jury trial, and that's really quite unfortunate. The city dropped the charges, and we know that the Roots appealed, and the higher courts also upheld the lower courts. So unfortunately, that's kind of where we are from there. But the last thing I wanted to show you is this is the Massachusetts Post Commission website. And I looked up Godin, and as you can see, he comes right up, Boston Police, and he is certified through 2029. So there you go. You can be a Boston police officer, lie under oath in interviews, in interrogatories where you are signed under oath, apparently, and still get recertified. So there's that. It's unfortunate, and it's really appalling that these officers never received any kind of punishment or sanction or anything to that effect. And he's still out there potentially not turning on, not following his protocol, not, turning on his body worn camera when he gets calls, and um, doing all sorts of who knows what, because we know that they're not trustworthy. This Officer Godin is not, and would this have been his first time doing something like this? I don't know. Maybe there's more. I mean, there are definitely more complaints under him. I happened to look under his name, and there's a ton of different complaints and things that have fallen under him besides this case. So he has his own issues. credibility issues, I would say. But you know what? Nothing ever happens to him, so he gets to continue being a cop and continue to wreak havoc on the people of Massachusetts. So it's just really something we all need to be very aware of going on in our towns, not just in Boston, big towns like Boston, but it's everywhere. It's all towns. It's little teeny towns and it's big towns like Boston. It could be anyone. So it's really important to know what's going on with uh with our law enforcement and how often this is actually happening and why isn't protocol being followed. It's really scary. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I really wanted to single this part out because I think this is really, really important. Because if he's going to lie about not wearing a body worn camera or wearing it, if he's going to lie about the fact that it was on, what else is he going to lie about? What other corrupt things is he going to do? And that's why these cases are so infuriating because they're supposed to be the good guys. They're supposed to be the ones helping, and yet they're causing more harm on society, and it really needs to be brought to light more and more. So if you have any more cases like this, you need to speak up, talk about them, share them to the world, let me know about them. I will share them. This isn't the only case like this. I guarantee it. And I'm sure it's not going to be the last either, unfortunately, because we live in a society where people are attracted to power and positions like law enforcement come with power. And it's very, very easy to be susceptible to all that that entails if you're not necessarily totally on the up and up ethically. So, um, just saying. All right, so that I will leave you guys here with that for today. I can't remember where I'm at for our next episodes. I'm gonna have to take a look and let you know. But unfortunately, Godin is still certified, and maybe we need to start a petition to get him decertified. I'm not really sure, but I think that might be a good start. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. See you guys. Bye.